We're introducing this idea of natural selection. We're putting it all together finally. We talked about traits. We talked about specific types of traits, adaptations. These are traits that help you to survive. We talked about how you get variances, little differences in a species through mutations, through sexual reproduction. These variations can become adaptations and can help a species survive. So let's talk about this big idea. Page 37. Here we go. Up in the right-hand corner of your page, you'll see a box labeled resources. You should write. Resources are the stuff in the environment needed for survival. These are often limited. They can be used up. Let's explore these more closely. Here we have an environment in which this little organism, a fish, lives in. Let's label these 4 resources for this fish. These bubbles represent. Can you guess? I hope so. All organisms need air. Air of some kind. You should label in that box air and draw in the bubbles so that this little organism can breathe on your paper. Up next, food. This organism apparently eats smaller fish, and so these smaller fish become his food. Up next, a mate. Haha, isn't that cute? Add a bow, add some lips, make it so it looks like this organism has a nice mate to hang out with. Remember, we are talking about an entire species here. Yes, that organism, this one fish, does not need a mate to survive, but he needs a mate for the species to survive. Last but not least, shelter. And yes, I want you to draw something that these fish can live in. Hey, if leaves aren't your thing, draw them a house. Hey, it can be a symbol, it can be a model for the place where these fish are going to live. Alright, so resources are the stuff, the air, the food, the mate, the shelter that a species needs to survive. If we need to pause here and allow everyone to label and draw their pretty pictures, now would be the time to do that. Up next, angry fish. It's all about competition. Competition is the effort of 2 or more organisms acting independently to get resources that are in short supply. When resources run low, organisms need to fight and compete for the resources. Classic example, these 2 battering rams are fighting over mates. They want to be the organism that gets to mate and reproduce. Good? Can we move on? Let's move on. Variation. We've been talking about variation last class. Let's keep going. Variations are differences in shape, structure, or function. Different kinds of one trait. Variations are caused by sexual reproduction or by mutations. Hello, WebQuest. We meet again. This deer has a variation, right? You may have seen these down. There's a park near Watkins Glen. You'll see a lot of white deer. So they are different. They have a variation in their fur color. We've talked about all different kinds of variations when we talk about dominant and recessive traits. There are differences in the way the proteins construct a trait. These little guys, we have a darker mouse and a lighter mouse. We'll have an opportunity to look more at these guys later. Think about camouflage here. Who is going to be better adapted to the environment? Ooh. Foreshadowing. Alright, speaking of adaptations, an adaptation is excuse me, a useful trait that helps an organism to survive, which gives it an advantage in its environment. Not just any old trait, one that is useful. Got it all written down? Alright, now you do. Let's go. Camouflage is an adaptation. Can you see this? Is my projector showing this beautiful black moth on this black tree? He blends in very well. Useful trait. Swimming in a school of fish. That is a behavioral adaptation, which is useful, which helps these fish to survive. Alright, box to the right. Overpopulation. Overpopulation is too many organisms in one environment. These organisms may have all sorts of different variations, but ultimately it can lead to competition. You're fighting over the resources in that environment. Alright, turn that page. Let's talk about this big idea. Put it all together. What is natural selection? Start with overpopulation. Overpopulation can lead to competition. Many organisms that are fighting for the same resources. All of these turtles, all fighting for the same shelter, the same food, the same mates, the same air. If you have many children in one family, that can cause more competition, fighting for the same food that Mama and Papa Bird are bringing home. This one's for Abby. She loves scorpions. Look at all of them, though. All these baby scorpions fighting for shelter, fighting for food, trying to survive in one environment. Alright, step 2. As a result of overpopulation. Due to competition, some organisms with their useful traits will be able to live on. Right? A speedy fish, that's a useful trait, may be able to get away from predators or sneak in and get the food first. But others will die. Sorry. This slow fish, or perhaps just not as speedy, doesn't have a useful trait, will not help him get the food, and therefore he will die. This is called the survival of the fittest. That does not mean the most like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Not the fittest, not the strongest, not the fastest, but the one that is most useful in the environment. This is also called the survival of the fittest. Not fittest as in I work out. No, that's not how it works. Fittest as in fits the environment. You need to be speedy. Those who are speedy will survive. You need to be small. Those who are small will survive. You need to be brown. Those who are brown will survive. Okay? There is not a place to write this. However, it is a good thing to note. So I might write that under those little dead and speedy fishes on your page. Also called the survival of the fittest. Alright. So, the usefulness of a trait depends on the resources and environment. A trait that is useful in one location, one environment, may not be useful somewhere else. Alright, this guy with his brighter stripes. Useful, it may be helpful in attracting a mate. Or perhaps it is camouflage, depending on where the environment is. If it is not camouflage, it's the opposite, making this fish more visible to predators. This guy with his skinny body. It would be useful if the environment had many small holes you could hide in or live in those holes. However, he might not be so strong. He might not be able to defend himself or attack another fish if needed. Alright, the speedy swimmer. It would be helpful for him to be able to escape quickly, go get to his shelter and hide from a predator. But he needs a lot of food. It takes a lot of energy to be quick. Alright, if you need a moment to write all these things down, please pause the video so you can get this all written down. Number 3. So, overpopulation leads to competition. Competition leads to better traits, getting the food, and surviving. Organisms that have the useful traits, those adaptations, will survive and then reproduce. If you do not have a trait to help you, you will die. If you do have traits to help you, you will survive in the environment. They can then pass on their traits to their offspring. These are supposed to be like the babies of these two parents. Okay, so we have two parents with a speedy trait, passing on the trait for speediness to their children. So, those without useful traits, sadly, die off. Oh, don't you wish you had useful traits now? Those with useful traits will have children who also have those useful traits. And so we start to have a population with more speedy fish, with more skinny-bodied fish, because those are the traits that are useful, that are helpful. Alright, our end result, the ending, the final, the finale of natural selection. The environment now has a lot more organisms that have certain traits. This is natural selection. Nature chooses the traits that will increase in the population. The environment, the resources, will define which traits are the most useful, therefore surviving, therefore having children, therefore more of these traits in the population. We will continue thinking about this very idea and get more practice with it, but for this point you should know these 4 big steps. Thank you, Natural Forces. Alright, there is an activity for you on classroom.google.com. Substitute, please give this class the rest of the time to complete that activity. If they finish early, they should be working on their vocabulary projects, or they can read silently or work on other homework. Thank you. Have a lovely day. I will see you all next class.